Hi, everyone. I'm Claire. I'm president of the Webby Awards. I'm coming to you from our offices in New York City. I want to say welcome. We're so excited to be hosting our second Crafted Future event of the season, and we're so happy to have you join us today. This event series is an offshoot from a program that we run in partnership with WP Engine called Crafted with Code. It highlights a curated list of amazing Webby winning experiences each year, and we tell the stories behind the build of those projects. I'm particularly excited about the theme of today's event, which is focused on how we as an industry can make the internet a better experience for people everywhere. People today are expecting faster and more efficient, seamless experiences across sites and the experiences they visit, and we're going to talk about the ways that you can deliver that. And since the event is called Crafted Future, we want to spend most of the conversation looking forward to the new ways people are using the internet and new technologies brands and companies can use to connect with their audiences and their customers. We're going to kick off with a presentation from Jason Cohen on how you can develop multivariate experiences that adapt to your customers' preferences and requirements in real time. So with that, I want to introduce Jason. Hi, Jason.
Hey, hey.
Jason Cohen is the founder and CTO of WP Engine, where he develops and refines the company's technology and product roadmap. He's a serial entrepreneur, having built 4 technology startups to more than $1 million in revenue. And he's a founding member of Capital Factory and was previously a founder of SmartBear and IT Watchdogs. I have seen Jason present many times, and it's always a great experience. So, Jason, I'm going to hand it over to you for you to take it away.
Great, thanks. And WP Engine loves the Webbies too. We've sponsored and collaborated with the event for over 4 years now, and WP Engine also a lot of our customers are among the winners of the Webby Awards and related things. So we have a lot in common, I guess. And Crafted with Code, specifically, it celebrates the developer and the beautiful novel work that we're all capable of creating, which is, I think it's inspiring. I think it's inspiring to see cutting edge work and really neat things. And you want to take half of those things back with you and say, hey, wait, that gives me an idea. I can make that too. And you can see which trends are emerging or which old trends are out, apparently. For me personally, it's colors. I'm always like, oh, it's orange year, I guess, and then no more orange or something like that. But I'm not much of a designer, so I'm impressed by simple things. But pushing boundaries and sharing it with the community is how our entire profession moves forward. So it's fun. So as much as this showcase has been inspiring, I think this year might be the last time you can represent your work to the Webbies with just a screenshot. And here's why. We're seeing a shift and an acceleration in user expectations. In other words, your job is not just to deliver a fast and secure website that adapts to screen size and orientation. That's just table stakes. Our new challenge is to develop what we call multivariate experiences, which I'll define and give you examples, to develop multivariate experiences that adapt to users' preferences and requirements in real time globally. So what do I mean by multivariate experiences? Well, if you've ever read science fiction, maybe you read one where like a character travels to a different timeline, and that timeline is radically different because of one small decision in history, like Back to the Future, or if you're not as old as me, maybe Loki with variants in the multiverse. So in the new future, you will have to deliver sites from one source that adapts to your users and their devices and the many different combinations that can be, hence difficult to capture all that in a screenshot. I'll give you some examples of what people are doing now. So like one variable you have to consider is device capability. And of course, we've been doing that for years with sites that adapt to desktop or mobile screen size, this sort of thing. But the world's becoming much more interesting and complicated when it comes to what a device can do. So consider, for example, the handwriting recognition API for Chrome OS. So you can use this capability to enable pen-based input on a note-taking app. And all the handwriting processing happens on the user's machine, not on your server, just magically works. So the promise of using something like the handwriting recognition API is this really awesome, smooth, effortless experience for the user without you having to become an expert in machine vision or machine learning or managing some cloud service and so on. So that's neat, but it doesn't work on an iPad. It doesn't work on a Windows device. It won't even work on a Chrome browser or in a normal laptop. So while this is neat to do, you also have to provide a fallback experience. Again, depending on what people have, they need a different experience. So another one you may already be doing, or maybe not, is differences in user settings. You usually think of settings as something that happens inside an app. I'm logged in. But now on the web, that's not true. There's settings that that people are starting to just expect that they can do without logging in, without it being a full app. So for example, users can set preferences in their browsers for things like reduced motion or font size or having light and dark modes like this, right? We see more and more of those. And users expect to be able to control it, or users expect you to pick up their natural browser settings so that someone who wants all websites to be bigger, that yours conforms to that. And so it's easier to use and nice and so on. So between device capabilities and these different user settings, now we've really overloaded your screenshot folder, right? Even just sending a link won't explain all the different ways that your site can manifest for users on the web. And we think this will happen even more and more over time. So let's make things more interesting. Have you heard about this thing called Css Container Queries? So the idea is that instead of one element or one component on a page only paying attention to the width of the whole browser, it can change depending on how it's used within the website. So what I mean by that, so we're used to now responsive design where the website on a laptop looks a certain way, but then on an iPad, things might reflow a little bit. Font size might change. Something might go from being side by side to vertical. And then on a phone oriented this way and a phone oriented in a portrait mode, and things are changing. We're used to that based on the device width. But that's not how we write code anymore. In the kind of new modern age, the way we write code is we'll make components, pieces of code that can be reused. I can stick this component, like this one here, I can stick it on this part of the page, or have 4 of them on this part of the page, or reuse it in another project. And so for that component, should that component look different and act different depending on how it's used within a page? Not just the whole browser, but how it's used. So with this thing called CSS Container Queries, you can do this. You can have components adapt based upon what's around it. So for example, imagine designing a calendar experience that elegantly morphs depending on how many events are scheduled in one day, or if you have a full week or a 3-day view, or if it's in the morning or if it's after hours. So one component that's adapting how it looks, how it works, depending on how it's used, or even like the details of that day. Or imagine the homepage of a newspaper with sections that change based on placement and the size of other sections. And by the way, if that newspaper is viewed on a Chromebook, then you can enable the user to leave comments with pen input. And if the user prefers reduced motion and a large font size, then maybe the carousel gets hidden. Maybe the headings bump up in font size. Maybe other things reflow because the users wanted a bigger font size. So that that change in heading size, for example, that may change the positioning of the elements around it. So while this is complicated, it's complex. What it does is it says, here's how we can make reusable, powerful components that nevertheless adapt in all these ways that I'm describing and are reusable and recombinable by developers, which is efficient for them. So this is exciting. This is neat. It's also a complicated, brand new world. But we think that this world, this idea of multivariate development, this is the kind of thing that we mean by that. And as large sites like Instagram and Amazon start delivering on these kind of multivariate experiences, which they are, then consumers are going to expect it from everybody, even small independent websites. It's just going to be what the internet should be, according to a person on the internet. And we've already seen this during the pandemic. We started seeing this effect unfold. So like now you expect your neighborhood restaurant to take your online order, know when your car is close by, bring it to your window. 2 years ago, some of these restaurants just had a PDF as their menu if they had a website at all. Now you expect it to be this whole interactive experience. That's happened relatively quickly in time. So here's another reason. So besides that, here's another reason why you'll want to embrace these. We may see search engines like Google start customizing search results based on which site delivers the best experience to a specific user, like these things. We've already seen Google make a lot of changes to the algorithm, which causes us to write code differently, how we use JavaScript or not, how we make reactive things or not, whether things are in JavaScript or not, now with Core Web Vitals. So, what could be next? Well, what could be next is, hey, websites that support the dark mode properly and the font size thing and the motion reduce setting, those things are in fact better for consumers. So as Google, just as we today prioritize sites with high Core Web Vitals score, maybe now we'll also promote sites that do those things, that have that multivariate experience. And all of a sudden it becomes vital for search engine that you do this. So again, we've seen this in the past, so it's sort of logical that this might happen soon. So this is a big opportunity for brands because it's better interactions with customers. But it's a lot of pressure on developers who have to do these new things and test against all these things and so forth. So the good news is that as the ecosystem of capabilities is growing just as user expectations are growing. So the power of web development tools is also growing. That's good. So let me give you some examples of that. React and other JavaScript frameworks help developers to work at that component level I was talking about rather than the page level. And these components can be built to adapt to user preferences, device capabilities much easier and more reusably than templating languages of the past. And then there's frameworks on top of those frameworks. And these developer tools make the configuration of JavaScript libraries easier, and then they bring their own site performance optimizations and their own features to bear. That makes it a little bit easier on developers too. So that helps developers build these multivariate experiences without having to fiddle with project setup or solve every problem. Again, these frameworks make it easier to do that, make it easier to collaborate with people even across teams because it's a common language and a common kind of code, common components and so on. So can you produce a multivariate experience with a traditional CMS? It's getting harder and harder. Oh, a CMS like WordPress is fantastic, but it was made with the expectation that what you write is what you publish. What it looks like is what happens. And now with WordPress giving more visual control to editors with the new Gutenberg block editor, that gap between editing screen and final product is closing. But we just said, with multivariate experiences, it's not necessarily true that what you wrote here is exactly what the user will see. It might change depending on who the user is. And WordPress is very popular. It's most CMSs that are in use today are WordPress, and 43% of every website on earth is WordPress. And for good reason. The editing and content collaboration experience in WordPress is better than other CMSs. So we want to keep the content editing and management of WordPress that everybody loves, but enable developers to deliver these multivariate experiences with these new technologies like React and so on. And so the answer is Headless Wordpress. So Headless WordPress is an approach where WordPress is still used to manage the content, but a separate system with these new technologies is used to produce and serve the front end of the site and thus those experiences. And so what we see with people who are moving to Headless WordPress is higher conversions, better search engine rankings, more revenue, which I know sounds like just the things that you say, oh, more conversions. But it's true because when the sites are faster, when search is more accurate, when it's responding to what people want, it does help you convert with e-commerce, and we see that. Or it does help someone in media capture someone's attention, they see more things and so forth. So actually we do see that people are more likely to convert, more likely to engage or engage more. So for a media site, more engagement does mean more revenue. For an e-commerce site, a higher conversion rate obviously means more revenue. So it really isn't just words. It's really true that a better site means more revenue for many kinds of sites. So one problem with that, and this is the minor part of this that's a sales pitch for us, is that once you decouple the CMS from the front end, you have to manage a constellation of tools and vendors to glue this all together. So you also have a multivariate bill, multivariate troubleshooting problem. So that's not good. And so this is the slight advertisement for WP Engine. We created a product called Atlas, which is a complete solution for headless WordPress. So we optimize the WordPress installation for you and the building and serving of your front end. So now you can get all those benefits, but from one company with one set of technology. So if you're interested in learning more about Atlas or Headless WordPress in general, you can visit us at wpengine.com/Atlas. And that's the end of the commercial part. So thanks for listening to that part. And hopefully, again, it's starting to get you excited and inspired. There's so many examples of this stuff. We actually had dozens of examples that we tried to cut down to a couple of simple ones here, but it's really exciting how many different things are coming about now with the advent of headless technologies and these modern technologies.
Thanks, Jason. That was an excellent call to arms for brands and developers to meet their customers' needs. Now we're going to have a discussion about how brands and agencies have approached some challenges with headless as a solution. So I am excited to bring on Brittney Kernan and introduce you to her. She is engineering lead at the creative company Elephant. Brittney is a New York-based lead engineer at Elephant with 10 years experience in tech for advertising. She has spearheaded apps, installations, and websites for brands like Apple, Google, Starbucks, and Comcast, just a few small ones. She's also taught front-end web development at General Assembly. Hi, Brittney, welcome.
Hi, Claire, and hi, Jason. Thank you so much for having me. It is so cool to be here with both of you. Jason, what a wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Brittney, Elephant is a creative company that creates experience for big brands like Beats, Twitch, Marc Jacobs, and Kia. How did Jason's presentation resonate with you, and how are you applying this technology approach at Elephant?
Yes, actually, Jason, I am on board with everything that you were saying there. I love how you were talking about components. That's kind of how we approach all of the websites that I've worked on here and all of the apps as well. And one of my first projects here was a headless installation and a decoupled reactive front end built on components. And you also mentioned kind of the Amazon effect. I've heard that word being thrown around in terms of customers want personalization, marketers want that for their customers. It works out for everybody. So that's interesting that you brought that up as well.
Brittney, how are you seeing people's expectations online change, and how are developers and marketers' expectations rising to that challenge? How's your team adapting?
With the kind of demand or expectation for that custom experience, that personalization, that this is the font size that I want, this is the light mode or dark mode that I want. I see a couple different things. For developers, we've been working with Headless for a while. I think even before we had the name Headless, which is a bit more new. I did my first site in like 2014. That was Headless. I didn't even know. And now we're kind of familiar with the technology there, and we're expecting easier to set up Headless installations. We're expecting more features for Headless CMSs. For example, we want real-time collaboration. We want better versioning. So my team is looking into cool new technologies, new open source headless CMSs that we can install for many different purposes. There's a headless CMS for anything you want to do. Enterprise, if you're a developer blogging, or in our case, we have a pro bono project that we're doing for All-Star Code. And we leveraged WordPress for that. And we compared WordPress headless against a bunch of different options. The customer was already on that, or our client was already on that. So we're like, this is a great tool to use for their site. Oh, and one other thing, for content creators, you have to create content for social. You have to create it for your apps. You have to create it for your website. Streamlining that content creation process in one location and then disseminating that out to all the multivariants is one of the great benefits what we recommend Headless for our customers and our clients as well.
And we were talking a little bit about the pro bono client that you've been working with, and you know, as somebody who also used to work in an agency and understands what pro bono work is like, you of course you want to do it because you want to give back to the community, but you're also spending money on time on resources and development costs. So I imagine Headless is great because it's efficient. And efficient in time and money as well.
Yeah, and it honestly does depend on the client. We chose Headless for that client because they are a nonprofit organization that teaches young Latino and Black teenagers and young men to code. So one of the languages that they're learning is JavaScript. And when they can get their hands into like kind of the code and help build like reactive front ends, we can give that opportunity for them to kind of build the site too with All-Star Code. So that was one of the reasons why we chose it. Although there are some downsides, as Jason mentioned, when you have a headless CMS with a decoupled reactive front end or multiple front ends, that does incur a bit more of a maintenance challenge. But once you set that up, for most clients, if they have the budget to support that every year, it's really great and really worth it. You're gaining a lot of efficiencies in development because your team can focus on the technology that they're most comfortable with and most knowledgeable in. And they're building something that is beautiful at the end of the day. Like, right, they're working with technology that they kind of don't have as many limits as if it was a typical platform with its own templating system.
Talking about beautiful sites, Elephant won the Webby this year for the Elephant website, which we also featured in Crafted with Code. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the experience of building the Elephant website? And I know that you have decided to do the challenge of redesigning it. So we'd love to hear about that as well and why you leaned on Headless for that.
Yeah, and thank you. That was an incredible, wonderful thing for the whole team who's worked on it. Like, everybody's touched it. So yeah, we originally wanted to redesign our site to kind of showcase all the proud work that we had done over the year. We originally were a kind of like a underground boutique startup agency. We were like coming out, like, we want to show everything that we've done. And we know the front end that we wanted to build had to be completely custom. We wanted like immersive animations. We wanted to show like the rhythm of the typography and the movement there, and also feature video. So it's a bunch of different really custom things that we knew we could only really achieve if we leaned on the technology that we were most familiar with, which, Jason, you all showed that logo for Next.js. We love Next.js. We used that before we were using Gatsby, which is great for quickly getting up a static site when we first launched. And then, yeah, we worked on Next.js. And then also we've had experience integrating that with Contentful, which is a headless CMS that is really easy to build a content model system in the back end. It also hosts your assets for you and provides some optimization on assets there. So we had experience with that. We chose these pieces to fit together because we know we're working on this between our client projects, not a ton of time there. So like, everybody on the team popped in and worked a little piece of it. We went through kind of like a proof of concept phase, then an MVP phase, and now we're actually wrapping up the full integration with Contentful backend. So it's a true kind of like headless approach. But yeah, thank you. That we're very excited to receive that award.
Jason, I mean, I'm sure you've spent time with the Elephant website. You are a little bit like us in that you get to have a great view of all of the incredible experiences that brands are creating and agencies are creating, just as because, of course, you're providing the hosting and working with them with WP Engine. Is there anyone that really stands out to you that has done an incredible job using Headless?
Well, you know, it's funny. Sometimes you can't tell. You know, it's not like there's a telltale sign that says this one's headless and this one's not. And some people mix technologies even in the same site, which again, well, is it headless? I don't know. It's kind of both. And maybe it's a bad, you know, maybe, you know, is it headless isn't really an answerable question in that case because it's both. So I do think sometimes you go to a website and it's just so snappy. You just can't believe it's already loaded. You just, what was that? Very often, not always, but very often that's an example of someone doing headless. And it just sort of shows, even if you don't look at the metrics and the numbers and graphs, like you can just see, oh, that's just way different of an experience. And, you know, when it's that obvious, like, I mean, numbers are fine, but, and they're good, but like, it just tells you like, oh, this is different and it's clearly better. And as more and more of the web does this, if you don't, you're just going to look and feel, maybe not even look, because it's not about the art, right? You're going to feel antiquated, which is probably not good in almost any industry.
Yeah, 100%. And you will also just lose customers because they don't want to hang around to wait for something to load. They're on to the next thing that they need to buy or need to do. So what is WP Engine doing to stay ahead of the curve and anticipating trends related to the future of the internet and future of the web?
Well, we're doing so much with Headless. So besides just the infrastructure to run the sites, We're doing things like we have a front-end framework that works with Next. Again, we're also fans of Next, so we're all fans of Next, terrific. But we have a framework on top of that called Faust.js, which is all open source, and you can go to faustjs.org and get it. And the idea is to make it even easier to make these headless WordPress sites. So, for example, one of the things that content creators want to be able to do is, as they're editing content, to click preview and to see what it would look like if they were to hit save before they actually hit save. And then finally, when they hit save, it works. With the traditional CMS, this is easy because the CMS renders the preview and knows about the preview content. But when things are decoupled, the front end doesn't necessarily know that this is a preview. So how does it get a signal that this thing is a preview? And if it asks for a preview from the CMS, how does the CMS know it's okay to deliver a preview to this other component? Who are you? Maybe you're not supposed to see this embargoed content. How do I know it's okay to give you the preview? So as soon as you decouple it, suddenly something simple like previews becomes harder. So that's the kind of thing that Faust solves, where you can have these all these headless benefits, but some of these drawbacks, like, wait a minute, what do we do about previews? Like, it solves that. It also has some other neat tools for building sites. So we're doing open source things inside WordPress and on the front end with Faust to make that easier. And I think, when Brittney said about people coming out of coding academies and using JavaScript, that's another thing we see. It's another motivation for people to use these technologies. So we see people saying, developers saying, I want to use JavaScript. And sometimes that's a seasoned developer who simply says, that's my career path I want. And sometimes, though, it's people out of school or coding academies who say, I learned JavaScript, so I want to program in JavaScript. Then they're correct, because they didn't learn Java in there, so they can't work on Adobe content, Adobe CMS, and they didn't learn PHP, so they can't work on WordPress. They learned JavaScript. So as more and more people, by choice or even by training, know JavaScript, that is another sort of force pointing people in this direction, besides all the stuff that we talked about that marketers like. So a lot of forces kind of aiming in this direction.
So interesting. Brittney, another question for you. How are you seeing project scopes evolve at Elephant?
Yeah, that is a great question. We are, with the advancement of technology, there's always something new and exciting to try. And there's always something that we've always wanted to do for our clients that we can finally do it because the technology is there. And we kind of want to be the first to try it out. So I do see some scopes evolving to include more creative technology too, and specifically in terms of AR and VR. So we have been doing more work there, and that's been really fun. And we're also seeing more like a need for prototyping. And also in prototyping, like we have done some prototypes for major brands, and we've powered those prototypes with headless CMSs just to get the content in there and to test out how things work at a rapid pace. And also to maintain these bigger systems with more modules that do more things like A/B testing, better caching, and personalization, you need bigger teams and you need dedicated time to allot for maintenance and upgrades. We can't fall behind. Everything is moving so quickly. Like, teams need to make sure that they have the time and the team to maintain the tech that they've put a lot of effort into crafting.
Now let's have just some open discussion. So this is the future. I love how, Jason, you're calling it the new future. So maybe we're in the new future now. But only a few people are doing what we're talking about. So which one of the things we're talking about will take off more than others? In other words, in 5 years, some of these things may come and go. Let's talk about what will stick around and what's the most important for developers and brands to be thinking about and keeping on.
So I think so one thing is universality. So when you hear things like, oh, if you're on exactly this device with exactly this thing, then there's this tech. Okay, that might be good, and depending on who your audience is, that might even be special and a competitive advantage. But it also could be that you say, look, if only a quarter of my visitors can see it, I just can't spend time on that. I need to do things that most, if not all of my visitors can interact with. So I would say it's possible that those things are just fads, and it's possible that it takes on a larger life, but you'll find out. And there's so many things today that already are supported everywhere that you could be working on that I would say, work on those. So for example, I think we've all seen lots of sites with dark mode and some of this tech stuff and everything. It does seem like it's universal, and why wouldn't it be? And it's useful, and why wouldn't it be useful? And so I think some of those things that you're starting to see everywhere, it's supported on all devices. That's a nice place to start. And Brittney was just saying, hey, what about experimenting with new things first to keep fresh, to stay ahead? Totally agree with that, especially on a competitive basis. So if someone's listening and they haven't been doing headless since 2014, right? And they're like, where do I start? What do I do? It's like, oh, well, you could start with the things that are already the most universal. Those are likely to stay forever. You're likely to look antiquated if you don't do it, right? Because it's a little bit ahead of the curve. So maybe start there and start to get used to that. And then maybe once you're there, you can say, all right, we can be more innovative, more forward-looking, and maybe we should as an organization, just for our own livelihood and long-term success. But let's start with, let's not change everything right away. Let's start with some easier things that people seem to really like.
Yeah, I think those are great points.
Anything that's useful always is what sticks around, isn't it? Brittney, how is your team preparing for the future?
Yeah, we are, like I mentioned, we're doing a lot of prototyping. We're inviting shops, like AR shops and VR shops, to come and do talks to the whole agency, not just the tech team. And one of the other cool things that I think we're also doing too is we're getting the full agency involved in new technology. Like, get in there and go ahead and make some NFTs. Go ahead and try out these AR experiences. It's not just for the tech team, the new and innovative tech. And we also collaborate really closely. Like, our creative team is often a source of like pushing us to do really immersive and impressive things on emerging tech. A lot of our creative team is obsessed with like what's cool and what's next. So it's like the whole agency is just really excited about what's coming. We kind of have to be in our industry and kind of it's almost 2020 too. So it's like everybody kind of has to see what's next in tech. We all have to keep up with it.
Yeah, of course. That's why you're the leaders, isn't it? If you're experimenting and doing R&D and trying new things, then you can bring them to your clients as well. All right, one final question, and I think we can move into questions from the audience. Emma, our producer, can start lining them up maybe. Are some of these developments going to cause marketing metrics to move? I know we're all of us as brands are thinking about what metrics we're focused on to make sure that we're succeeding. Do you think that some of these things are going to change the way that we measure metrics?
Well, I think brought up some great points there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I'll let you talk about the ones that you were going to get into.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think when you think about the fundamental thing you want customers to do, maybe it's not different. Engagement, converting to a sale, signing up for a newsletter, watching more articles, clicking like those kind of things. Surely that's still what you want. Like, an e-commerce site isn't suddenly going to not want conversions. I do think that on the one hand, some of it is the same stuff as before. Like, we all know that performance of the site leads to higher conversions in e-commerce. There's a zillion studies. It's logical that it would be true. And yes, we have seen customers do that and see more sales, or we've seen media companies do that and then get higher search rankings and therefore get more traffic, so that indeed a faster site got them more traffic, and thus, because in a media site, the revenue is tied to page views, and thus more revenue. We have specifically seen that happen. So I think, does it move the marketing metrics? Yes. Now, can you promise always and how much? Oh, of course not. But does it help with that? Yes. Sometimes for the same old reasons, like performance. Okay, and this is how we do perform. This is like another level of performance now. So, okay. Could there be other kinds of metrics that are new, though, that get you from that first visit or the first moment, I guess, to the conversion or whatever the ultimate goal is? Could those be new? Yeah, I think some old ones are still right, but yeah, I think some new ones could be possible too. So, for example, even now with Core Web Vitals, you could argue these are a new spin on performance. It's looking at what performance and experience means in a different way. And so it's already changed the specific metrics and the specific things that web developers are using to answer the question, is my site performant? Is my site good? And of course, will my site be ranked high? And so Core Web Vitals is an example of new metrics that some of which we were looking at before, some of which people were not valuing before, but now they do. So I do think that won't be the end of the new metrics, but at the end, like sales are sales. I'm not sure that will change.
Yeah. Especially as we come up to the next couple of weeks for the holidays, that people are going to need the fastest sites that perform excellently if they're going to be keeping up.
Oh yeah.
Brittney, sorry I interrupted you.
Oh no, I was just going to say the also ability to update your front end with new features more rapidly with a headless decoupled front end, and also deploy content more rapidly will help you reach your customers across more channels quickly. Also will lead to increase in sales and improved metrics.
That's a really interesting point, because if you'll be able to respond really rapidly and change things really rapidly, then you're also going to be able to understand your metrics in a different way as well, rather than having to slowly take time to change things and see what is working and what's not working. That's a great point. Okay, Emma, have we got questions in the audience? Looks like there's some chats here. All right, question 1. Will multivariant experiences require big teams to set up and keep functional, or will these things become automated after setup? That's a great question.
Yeah, that's a great question. I can take a quick stab and then pass it over to Jason. I think it does depend on the needs of the client. I think whenever we approach a new project, we look at the capabilities of the team to not only work with us to build, but also to maintain. And we never propose anything that is going to be outside of the scope. Obviously, we want to work with our clients. So it depends on what's needed. Sometimes we can set up tools that have automation built in that are easy to maintain, or if the client might have their own development team, we'll recommend this certain setup, and we'll say this might take every year, a couple times a year, update the CMS. So give them a sense of the scope of the maintenance requirement needed. That's our recommendation, and I'll pass it over to Jason.
Yeah, I think certainly if there's many behaviors and looks and feels and things, there's more maintenance and more work to do to verify that things work properly or well in all these different configurations, and that just takes more time. So either that you can take that in the form of slower updates, or if there's more people on the team, then maybe you're taking it in the form of a bigger team. Of course, technology also is useful in making things efficient. So I think at the same time, some of these new techniques help make those things more efficient. So, like for example, for dark mode, to create a dark mode theme in the first place takes a lot of work, because there's colors and things and different things on top of other things, and this text color but against that, and oh wait, now my images look funny because they all have this weird white halo on them because they weren't properly transparent. Okay, so to initially generate that dark mode theme might be hard, but after that you've got your whole palette in the form of, say, CSS or whatever, and so now when you add just that other paragraph of text, probably there's no extra work to be done. Now, maybe there's a little bit more testing to be done, okay, but you don't necessarily have to test every page in the world. So that's an example where maybe there's a large startup cost and not a large ongoing cost. A little bit, though, not zero, but a little bit, maybe that's worth it. Another thing is those components we talked about, which again, React and Vue and Angular have this concept. And now with things like this new CSS concept that I referred to that's brand new, those components can be that much smarter, you might say. That helps with this problem, because yes, it is hard for a component to say, well, at this width and at this width and if this and the text, oh, you want big text but small width, and so and like, yeah, making all of those combinations work and testing that's a lot of work. There's no doubt. But if the result is not a web page but a reusable component, well, then I can take all that work and I can leverage it, meaning I can now put it here. There's another whole site altogether I can put it on. And so, yeah, that was a lot of work, but now that it's so configurable or so smart, you might say, oh, well, now if I just recombine that in places, I can do really fancy things. And now I don't have bugs because I've used this great component. So again, componentization is a mechanism for, yes, taking something complicated, but encapsulating it in a way that maybe is more efficient to repeat. So none of those things magically make all the complexity vanish. No, they don't. But you know, do they make it a little more efficient so that it's you can stomach that extra complexity because you have enough support systems in those things to do it.
Yeah. All right, we've got a few more questions here. Why do you think consumer expectations have changed so dramatically in recent years? Who wants to take that one?
Yeah, that's a great question. Jason, you want to start with that and then punt it over to me?
Sure. I mean, I think maybe it's Occam's razor, because if one person figures out some really great experience, then their competitors are at a disadvantage. So they try to catch up. Or again, if Amazon, well, even if Amazon doesn't do it, because let's be honest, Amazon's website is hideous and weird. Like we're not following design advice from Amazon, right? So like it's okay, but it is true that okay, so some platform that a fifth of the restaurants use for their ordering system does some really nifty things. Okay, well then 4/5 of the restaurants don't have that. And who do you reorder from during COVID when you're constantly ordering from restaurants? Well, the one that remembered your order from last time and makes it easy to tip in a certain way. And I don't know, whatever, like it remembered your credit card. So you really are just like, oh my God, it's too easy. Are you going to do that? Or are you going to struggle with some website that hasn't figured it out? And so in that sense, like, yeah, that's pretty meaningful. And if I'm that other restaurant and I've got to take online orders, I've just got to, thanks COVID, I just need to for competitive reasons. So, and then in any of these industries that are competitive anyway, travel and fashion, et cetera, like, I mean, they're already used to like fighting each other like this. Like, that's not new. It's not like just now people online have been duking out on who has like great experiences. This is a long tradition of people duking it out. So maybe it's just as simple as that, the competition, one person figures something out or a group in the industry figures it out, the rest have to, or they get left behind. If you get kicked off to page 2 of the search engine results, that's pretty good motivation. You need to do something, you know, full stop. Like whatever that is, you need to do it. You know, like you don't have a choice.
Yeah, we had probably 5 or 6 years ago, we did a trend for the Webby Awards, which was focused on what we called then the most entitled consumer the world has ever seen. And now what you're saying, innovation begets innovation. So people are just getting more entitled because things are getting better and easier. The internet is making monsters out of people. Brittney, have you got anything to add, or we have one final question?
Oh yeah, just quickly, I'm seeing that obviously the same thing in the developer community too, like between all the frameworks you showed, Jason, and all the different headless CMSs that we're researching. It's always like each one has a different spin, like, oh, I can do this better. And so they, like big communities of devs, go after it and release it. And then there's this really cool iterative feedback approach where people with open source programs and software are diving in and fixing little things. So that kind of growth is just incredible. And the speed of that development is also really impressive and sometimes dizzying. But it's just so cool. Like if you have a big bug and a big software, you can just open a bug fix for it if you have one, or an issue, and watch that in real time and see who fixes it first. It's kind of like a little street cred that you can get.
All right, great. We've got one question which we think is a really good one. The producers are thinking it's a really good one to wrap up with. Can you give an example of how using headless technology provided flexibility that ended up being super valuable?
Yeah, I'll start with, we had a project for a fashion company that had, they didn't have a really big budget, but they had a lot of viewers across different channels. So we started them off with, I believe it was a website that then morphed into an iOS app and then a tvOS app. And that let them, their product disseminate to a much wider audience and meet the audience where they were. And we were able to do that incrementally. So that was a good example of a headless that had a flexibility. It was also a component-based system, as Jason was speaking to. We were able to reuse kind of not necessarily the exact same code, but a lot of the planning and design across components, across systems.
Yeah, remixing into other subsites is a great one as well. And one of the things we see that's interesting from a flexibility point of view is sometimes this is spoken of as like either you have your traditional CMS or you've redone the entire site as headless, but that's not necessary. You can have your website and then also make a headless site which sources from that data, and that new site might just do one thing. Something that one thing might be something where headless technology is just the perfect fit. It's actually 10 times faster to implement there than it was there, just because of the nature of that was just especially good for the headless use case. And you still have a regular site. Maybe you get there from blah 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 / whatever, and it just goes over there. And so we have people doing that, and so it just goes to show like, oh, that is a kind of flexibility in saying when this is the right tool for the job, I will use it. And when if I don't want to do that yet, or it's not the right tool for the job, then I won't. Well, that's a good kind of flexibility. And sometimes people don't think about the fact that like, they just think, oh, in order to get these benefits, I have to do all this other stuff. Not necessarily.
Yeah. Great. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. The producers are telling me to wrap everything up. Thank you, Jason and Cole and Brittney. It's been fascinating, and it's so amazing to be able to empower our community to create better experiences for their customers. I want to say a quick thank you and a few closing remarks. Thank you to WP Engine for your support over the years. We've been able to do so much more with your support. And thank you, Jason and everyone, and Brittney and everyone for joining us today. While I have everybody, I just want to remind everyone that the Webby Awards final entry deadline is coming up on December 17th. We have new categories across websites, mobile sites, apps, and advertising. We also wanted to remind people that if you enter the Webby Awards this year, then you also have a chance to be included in our Crafted with Code program for next year. You can see the program on the Webby Awards website. It's webbyawards.com/craftedwithcode. Some incredible projects there. And as somebody recognized by the Webby Awards, you also have the opportunity to be highlighted there as well. So the deadline, you have to enter if you're going to be able to win. The deadline is December 17th. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for having us.